Before this day ends, you will almost certainly consume a substance that not only sickens your body, but also clouds your soul. And the greatest and most terrifying danger is that you believe it to be a source of health. This isn't about calories, or fat, or the fleeting advice of modern science. This goes deeper, to the very essence of creation, to a spiritual poison hidden in plain sight on your kitchen counter, in your refrigerator, a silent traitor you invite into your home every single day. You feel its effects, don't you? That strange lethargy that isn't just physical tiredness, that fog in your mind that makes prayer feel distant and difficult, that subtle thread of melancholy that you can't quite trace to any specific event. You mistakenly blame your stress, your work, your lack of sleep, but the root is far more insidious. It is a corruption you are willingly ingesting, a dissonance you are placing into the temple of your body, which then echoes into the sanctuary of your soul. For centuries, this secret has been buried in the cryptic, mystical writings of a woman who saw the world not as mere matter, but as a living symphony of God's energy, a doctor of the church, whose visions pierced the veil between the physical and the divine. She left us a map, a guide to navigate the hidden spiritual dangers in our food, and today, for the first time, we will unseal her most urgent warnings. We will not just identify these 3 hidden poisons. You will learn precisely how they create spiritual static, cutting you off from divine clarity, and you will receive the sacred protocol to cleanse your home and your spirit, starting this very evening. The vitality, the clarity, and the peace that God intended for you are within reach, but you must first have the courage to see the enemy you have been feeding. If you have ever felt a spiritual heaviness that you could not explain, a weight upon your soul that no amount of rest could lift, I want you to pause right now and comment below. Lord, reveal what is hidden in my life. This is not just a comment. It is a prayer, an act of faith, an opening of your heart to the truth that is about to be revealed. Your journey into light begins with this small, humble step, acknowledging that there are forces at play you may not yet understand. The modern world has taught you to trust labels and scientific studies, but it has made you deaf to the wisdom of the saints and the subtle language of your own soul. You've been taught to fear fat and salt, while the true spiritual toxins are celebrated as convenient or even healthy. This is the great deception, and breaking free from it is the first step toward reclaiming your divine inheritance of health and holiness. The knowledge I am about to share is not meant to create fear, but to empower you with sacred truth. It is a light to be shown into the darkest corners of your pantry. For Saint Hildegard of Bingen, food was never just fuel. It was a sacrament or a poison, a harmony or a discord. It could either tune your soul to the frequency of heaven or drag it down into the murky vibrations of the earth. She saw the spiritual properties of every root, every leaf, every grain of wheat, and she saw how certain substances, even those created by God, could be used by the forces of darkness to create a foothold in a person's life, starting with the body to eventually conquer the soul. She chronicled these visions with painstaking detail, not for the scholars of her time, but for you, living in this age of profound confusion. But what Saint Hildegard saw that night, in the flickering candlelight of her scriptorium, a vision so terrifying it caused her to fall ill for 3 days, would change everything. It was the year of our Lord, 1151, within the cold stone walls of the Rupertsberg Abbey, near Bingen, Germany. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax, drying herbs, and the faint, sweet smell of old parchment. This was the world of Hildegard, the woman they called the Sibyl of the Rhine, a Benedictine abbess, a visionary, a composer, and a healer whose counsel was sought by popes and kings. Her authority was not born of academic study alone, but from a divine light she called the Umbra Viventis Lucis, the reflection of the living light, a stream of consciousness that had flowed into her since she was a child. It is from this divine source that she wrote her magnum opus on holistic health and creation, a work we now know as Physica. You must understand, this was not a medieval cookbook or a collection of old wives' tales. It was a divinely dictated codex on the spiritual and physical properties of everything in God's creation. To Hildegard, a sprig of rosemary was not just an herb, it was a vessel of divine warmth and loyalty. A block of salt was not just a mineral, it was the earth's crystallized integrity. She was practicing a form of sacred science, a spiritual discipline that saw the hand of God in every atom. This was not superstition. It was subtilitas, a term she used to describe the intricate, subtle network of connections that weave the physical and spiritual worlds together. She taught that sin and sickness were two sides of the same coin, both stemming from a loss of viriditas, the greening power, or life force of God that animates all things. When you consume something that lacks or corrupts this viriditas, you are not just harming your body, you are creating a spiritual vacuum within yourself, an opening for despair, sluggishness, and temptation to enter. But this radical vision, this sacred synthesis of body and soul, was not easily accepted. Even within the church, there were those who whispered that her visions were the product of feminine hysteria, of a melancholic temperament, or worse, of demonic influence. A certain monk from a rival monastery, named Tengswich of Andernach, publicly accused her of heresy, writing scathing letters that questioned her sanity and her orthodoxy. He represented the cold, sterile logic that refuses to see the spirit in the matter. The very same spirit of skepticism that tells you today that your food choices have no bearing on your spiritual life. But Hildegard, fortified by the living light, stood firm. In a letter to the Archbishop of Mainz, she wrote, "The things I write flow from a mystical vision from God. If you doubt them, you do not doubt me, a poor, unlearned woman, but the very source from which they flow." It was in one of these letters, a fragment discovered centuries later and catalogued as the Folio Codicis 93b, that she first alluded to the kitchen poisons. She described a subtle corruption entering the monasteries, a sweetness that breeds sorrow, and a root that mimics the holy, but brings forth black bile. The monks who read it were confused, thinking she spoke only in metaphor about theological disputes. They could not fathom that the doctor of the church was giving them a literal, urgent warning about the food on their plates. They saw her words as poetry, but she was handing them a diagnosis. The tragedy is that we are still making the same mistake today. We read the lives of the saints as beautiful stories, but we fail to see them as practical, life-or-death instruction manuals for our own journey. If you are ready to stop treating sacred wisdom as mere poetry, type, "I am ready for the truth" in the comments. Let this be your declaration that you are moving from passive believer to active participant in your own salvation. But the letter that followed her initial warning, a private correspondence to a fellow abbess named Hazecha of Krauftal, was far more explicit and terrifying. It spoke not of a subtle corruption, but of a silent plague in the larders of the faithful, one that could make a man's prayers fall dead from his lips. But the next letter, detailing the first of the poisons she was shown, would assuage the fears of some, but it would terrify even the most faithful. To understand the poisons Hildegard revealed, you must first understand the spiritual mechanics of God's creation as she saw it. Imagine your soul as a perfectly tuned harp, and God is the master musician. When your life is in harmony, when your thoughts, actions, and body are aligned with His will, the music that flows from you is one of peace, clarity, and strength. Now imagine the food you eat. Each substance, according to Hildegard, has a specific vibrational frequency, a musical note. Foods filled with viriditas, that divine greening power, are like pure, resonant notes that harmonize with your soul's harp. Spelt, fennel, chestnuts, cooked apples. These things tune your strings, making the divine music clearer and more beautiful. But then there are the other substances, the poisons. These are not merely foods that are unhealthy in the modern sense. They are substances that introduce a horrifying dissonance. They are like a screeching, discordant note played loudly against the melody of your soul. A single bite can be like a snapped string on the harp. It doesn't just create a bad sound, it disrupts the entire instrument's ability to play the divine music. This is why you can eat a healthy meal according to modern science, yet feel spiritually dead inside. You might be consuming a plateful of discord. Let me give you a concrete example. You decide to make a healthy choice and have a large glass of ice-cold water with your meal. Your doctor would approve, but Hildegard saw this as a spiritual catastrophe. She taught that coldness in the body quenches the fire of digestion, the very furnace where the body extracts life force. Spiritually, this act of consuming raw cold introduces a coldness to the soul, dampening the fire of the Holy Spirit within you. It is an act of spiritual self-sabotage. The correction is not to stop drinking water, but to consume it warm or at room temperature, respecting the sacred fire within. It's a small change that sends a powerful message. You are choosing to cooperate with God's design, not fight against it. This brings us to a critical spiritual enigma that Hildegard often contemplated. She saw the perfect human being as a balance of four essential forces, reflecting the cosmic order. The four bodily humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, mirroring the four elements of creation: earth, air, fire, water. These are held in harmony by the grace of the Holy Trinity, the three divine persons. In a state of grace, these numbers work in synergy. But she posed a riddle in her writings. There is a substance that, when consumed, takes one of the four and corrupts it so completely that it subtracts from the grace of the three, leaving not the perfection of 12, but the brokenness of 10. It creates a state where man is less than he was created to be. Think about that. Four humors, four elements, three persons of the Trinity. There is a sacred arithmetic to your being. 4 plus 4 plus 3 equals 11, a number of incompletion, of the apostles without Judas. But with grace, it is elevated to the perfection of 12. Yet a single poison can fracture this divine equation, leaving you in a state of perpetual spiritual imbalance. What substance has the power to do this? The answer lies in the revelations to come. We have been trained to think of our bodies as machines and our food as fuel. This is a profound and dangerous error. Your body is a musical instrument, and your food is the very music you choose to play upon it. Every meal is a choice between harmony and discord, between tuning your soul to heaven or to the static of the world. Are you beginning to see the exhaustion, the brain fog, the inability to connect deeply in prayer? It may not be a failing of your will, but the deafening noise of the dissonant foods you are consuming. If this is making sense to you, if you feel a shift in your understanding, comment, "Lord, tune my soul." This is your prayer to begin the process of healing, of restoring the divine harmony within you. The world offers you convenience, but it robs you of resonance. The enemy offers you flavor, but it serves you dissonance. But the first poison Hildegard revealed, the one that begins the fracturing of your divine harmony, was not some exotic substance from a faraway land. It was common, celebrated, and likely in your home right now. But the first full revelation of this specific poison, documented in the margin of a musical composition she was writing, was still to come. The 10th revelation, the very first of the poisons Hildegard was commanded to expose, concerned something you see as pure, white, and harmless. It is the foundation of our daily bread, the substance of our celebrations, and the comfort food of our childhoods. She saw it in a terrifying vision, not as a field of golden wheat, but as a field of pale, lifeless ghosts. The revelation is documented in her lesser-known treatise, Liber Simplicis Medicinae, where she describes the soul of wheat. To Hildegard, whole spelt and whole wheat were gifts from God, filled with warmth, strength, and viriditas. They were the perfect food to build a strong body and a resilient spirit. But she saw a future in which man, in his pride and impatience, would commit an act of violence against this sacred grain. She saw millstones grinding not just the grain, but grinding the very life force out of it. And then, she saw a process she described as scouring with white dust and false fire, a chemical bleaching and stripping that rendered the flower a pale corpse. The poison, the 10th on her list of spiritual dangers, is refined white flour. But here's the critical part you have never been told. The danger isn't just the lack of nutrients. That is a purely physical concern. The spiritual danger, as Hildegard saw it, is that white flour becomes a spiritual counterfeit. It looks like bread, it tastes like bread, but it is spiritually empty. When you consume it, your body is tricked. It expects the life force, the viriditas of the whole grain, but it receives nothing. This creates a deep, cellular confusion and disappointment. Spiritually, this translates into a soul that is constantly seeking but never satisfied. It feeds an endless cycle of craving and emptiness. It is the perfect food for a restless, anxious, and spiritually hungry age. You eat a pastry, a piece of white bread, a bowl of pasta, and you feel a momentary comfort, but it is followed by a subtle, deep-seated spiritual malaise. You have fed the flesh, but starved the spirit. The correction she offered is simple and profound. Return to the whole grain. Specifically, she championed spelt, which she called the Prince of Grains, as it is easily digested and contains the most balanced spiritual warmth. By simply replacing the white flour in your home with whole spelt or whole wheat flour, you are performing a powerful act of spiritual restoration. You are telling your body and your soul that you will no longer accept counterfeits. You will only accept the authentic, life-filled creation of God. This brings us to a word you have likely said without understanding its sinister, hidden meaning. The word is enriched. Modern food manufacturers strip the flour of its God-given nutrients and then add back a few synthetic, dead vitamins, stamping the package with the word enriched. From Hildegard's perspective, this is a blasphemy. It is man's arrogant attempt to improve upon God's perfect creation. It is like taking a masterpiece, throwing acid on it, and then dabbing on a few strokes of cheap paint, and calling it restored. Consuming enriched flour is, therefore, consuming a monument to man's pride. It fills you with the vibration of arrogance, not the humble, life-giving energy of the earth. Have you ever considered this? Have you ever thought about the spiritual consequence of the words printed on your food? If you are now looking at the bread in your kitchen differently, comment, "No more counterfeits," below. Let this be a vow you make to your Creator and to yourself, to seek authenticity in all things, starting with the bread you eat. You are beginning to understand the subtlety of the enemy's plan. He does not need to tempt you with obvious, blatant sins when he can simply weaken your spirit, day by day, meal by meal, with counterfeit foods that leave you too drained and dissonant to even desire prayer. The war for your soul is being fought not just in your mind and heart, but in your kitchen. But if the emptiness of white flour was number 10, the revelations that followed were far more disturbing. The next revelation included a word, a common food item that you have not only said but have likely eaten this very week, a food celebrated for its supposed health benefits, but one that Hildegard warned opens the soul to unclean spirits. Palavras, 947, Parte 510. The ninth poison revealed to Hildegard strikes at the heart of our modern dietary habits, targeting a food so common it is found in nearly every kitchen and celebrated in nearly every culture. In a vision that took her from the quiet solitude of her abbey to the noisy, muddy yard of a peasant farm, she saw not with her physical eyes, but with the eyes of her soul. She watched as a farmer slopped his pigs, and she perceived a dark, heavy energy emanating from the animals. This wasn't about the filth of the sty. It was something deeper, something inherent to the creature's spiritual nature. Her writings in Kosai et Kure are startlingly clear on this point. The ninth hidden poison is the flesh of the pig. Now, before you dismiss this as an outdated dietary law, you must understand Hildegard's reasoning. It had nothing to do with trichinosis or cholesterol. It was a matter of spiritual resonance. She taught that every animal has a dominant spiritual characteristic. A lamb, for instance, embodies innocence and sacrifice. A fish from clean waters embodies clarity. The pig, she wrote, has a nature that is spiritually unclean and disordered, and it will consume anything without discernment. Its energy is chaotic, heavy, and oriented entirely toward the earth. When you consume pork, Hildegard warned, you are not just consuming protein and fat. You are absorbing its spiritual characteristics. You are ingesting the energy of spiritual indiscrimination. This creates a subtle but powerful effect on your soul. It weakens your spiritual discernment. It makes it harder for you to distinguish between holy desires and worldly impulses, between the voice of God and the whispers of temptation. It grounds your spirit so heavily in earthly concerns that it becomes difficult to elevate your mind and heart to God. Think about it in your own life. After a heavy meal of bacon, sausage, or ham, do you feel spiritually light and ready for contemplative prayer? Or do you feel heavy, sluggish, and drawn more towards sleep or worldly entertainment? The body and soul are inextricably linked. What you do to one, you do to the other. The great deception here is that pork is presented as a staple, a normal and even necessary part of many diets. It is the cornerstone of comfort food, the flavor of celebration for many. The enemy is clever. He takes a substance that weighs down the soul and makes it the centerpiece of family gatherings and moments of joy, forever associating spiritual heaviness with happiness and fellowship. The correction is not to become rigid or judgmental, but to begin the process of lovingly removing this substance from your diet as an act of spiritual purification. Replace it with lamb, with clean fish, or with the plant-based proteins God has provided. This is not about deprivation. It is about choosing a higher vibration, a clearer channel for divine communication. Every time you choose a cleaner protein over pork, you are casting a vote for spiritual clarity. You are actively working to unburden your soul from the heavy, chaotic energy that keeps it tethered to the ground. If you are willing to make this small sacrifice for the sake of greater spiritual clarity and discernment, comment, "I choose clarity" below. This is your personal commitment to elevating your spirit, one meal at a time. The world will tell you this is foolishness. Your friends and family may not understand, but you are not on a diet for the world. You are on a sacred pilgrimage for your soul. You are seeking the subtilitas of God's creation, the subtle truths that have been buried under centuries of noise and disinformation. Hildegard's vision didn't end with the pig. She saw its chaotic energy seeping into other foods, contaminating them. She warned specifically of foods cooked in lard, which transfer that same disordered spiritual signature to otherwise healthy vegetables or grains. The poison was not just the substance, but the essence it carried. And as she watched this dark energy move from the animal to the cooking pot, her vision shifted, sharpening on a new and even more insidious threat, something that didn't come from an animal, but grew from the very soil God had blessed. A beautiful, tempting fruit that brought with it not life, but a strange and venomous sadness. Palavras 9:29, Parte 6:10. The eighth poison Hildegard identified is one of the most shocking because it masquerades as pure natural goodness. It is a jewel of the earth, a fruit beloved by children, a symbol of summer sweetness and innocence. Her revelation concerning this food is found in a stark warning within Physica, where she meticulously documents the hidden dangers of seemingly harmless plants. In a vision, she was shown a beautiful field under a warm sun, dotted with vibrant red gems nestled amongst green leaves. People were gathering them with joy, their baskets overflowing. But as she looked closer with her spiritual sight, she saw a faint, gray mist rising from the ground around these plants, a vapor of earthly decay and sorrow that clung to the fruit. The people were eating the fruit, and as they did, a shadow of that same gray mist entered into them, dimming the light in their eyes. The eighth poison is the strawberry. Hildegard's reasoning was precise and rooted in her understanding of cosmic order. She taught that foods that grow high on trees, reaching for the sun, are filled with a lighter, more celestial energy. Foods whose roots grow deep in the earth, like carrots or spelt, draw up terrestrial strength and stability. But the strawberry, she explained, is a treacherous anomaly. It is a fruit, which should be filled with the sun's joy, but it grows hugging the damp, dark earth. It grows so close to the ground that it absorbs the vapors of the soil, becoming a vessel for mold, slugs, and the general energy of decay. Spiritually, she warned, consuming strawberries introduces a melancholic and unstable quality into the blood. This doesn't necessarily cause immediate, dramatic depression. It is more subtle. It creates a spiritual constitution that is more susceptible to sadness, to groundless fears, and to a feeling of being stuck or stagnant in life. It's the spiritual equivalent of eating beautiful-looking food that has a faint, almost imperceptible taste of mildew. You may not be able to name what's wrong, but a part of your soul recognizes that it has ingested something impure. The concrete example is the person who feels a persistent, low-grade sadness they cannot shake. They've been to doctors, they've tried to change their mindset, but the gray cloud remains. They may be, in fact, consuming a steady diet of this fruit of the earth's sorrow, constantly reinforcing the very spiritual state they are trying to escape. The correction is not to fear all fruit, but to choose with wisdom. Hildegard passionately recommended fruits that grow on trees, especially cooked apples, pears, and cherries, which she saw as being filled with the sun's pure, joyful energy. Cooking the fruit, in her view, also helped to purify it of any residual earthly dampness. By choosing a baked apple with cinnamon over a bowl of raw strawberries, you are making a conscious choice for spiritual joy over spiritual melancholy. You are choosing the sun over the soil's shadow. This is not about a chemical analysis. It is about spiritual resonance. Are you choosing foods that lift your spirit toward heaven, or foods that bind it to the damp earth? It is a question you must begin to ask at every meal. If this insight has opened your eyes to the hidden energies in your food, write in the comments, "I choose joy." Let it be a prayer and a declaration of intent. You are taking back control of your spiritual environment, which includes the food you place in your holy temple. The world has sold you a lie, that if something is natural, it is automatically good for you. Hildegard teaches a more nuanced, more profound truth, that we must use divinely inspired discernment to understand the subtle spiritual properties of all things. Some natural things heal, and some, despite their beauty, carry a hidden burden. But as Hildegard's vision of the strawberry fields faded, it was replaced by a far more intimate and heart-wrenching scene. She was shown a mother, lovingly preparing a meal for her sick child, unknowingly giving him a substance that would worsen not his physical ailment, but the coldness and fear in his soul. Palabras 911, Parte 710. This next revelation, the seventh on Hildegard's list, carries a particular emotional weight because it involves the very substances we associate with nurturing, comfort, and maternal care. It is a warning aimed directly at the hearts of mothers, fathers, and anyone who cares for the well-being of their family. The vision that came to her was one of profound sadness. She saw a young mother, her face etched with worry, sitting by the bedside of her feverish child. In her hands, she held a cup of cool, fresh milk, a timeless symbol of nourishment. She coaxed the child to drink, believing she was providing the very best nature had to offer. But as the child drank, Hildegard saw the fever in his body lessen slightly, but a different kind of cold, a spiritual chill, began to seep into his soul. His fear of the dark grew, his reliance on his mother became more anxious, and a subtle wall of isolation began to build around his heart. The seventh poison is not milk itself, but specifically cold dairy products, including milk, cheese, and yogurt, consumed in their raw or cold state. Hildegard's theology of health was built on the principle of warmth. The soul, she taught, is a fiery, living entity. The body is its temple, and that temple must be kept warm and receptive. Digestion itself is a form of cooking, an internal fire that transforms food into life force. When you consume cold and phlegmatic substances like cold dairy, you are essentially pouring water on this sacred internal fire. Physically, this leads to poor digestion, mucus, and a feeling of heaviness. But spiritually, the consequences are far more dire. Consuming cold dairy, she warned, generates a coldness of the heart and breeds a sluggish and fearful spirit. It dampens the inner fire of courage and faith. It makes the soul more susceptible to anxiety, to scrupulosity, and to a feeling of being spiritually isolated from God and others. Think of the child in the vision. The mother, with the best intentions, was giving him a substance that cooled his fever, but also chilled his spirit, increasing his fear and anxiety. How many times have we, in our modern wisdom, done the same? We give our children a cold glass of milk or a cup of yogurt from the fridge, thinking we are building strong bones, when we may also be contributing to a foundation of spiritual anxiety. The protocol she offered is one of profound, loving wisdom. She did not say to abandon dairy entirely. Instead, she insisted on transforming it with warmth. Milk should be warmed, perhaps with a touch of honey or cinnamon. Cheeses are best when melted or cooked into dishes. This act of heating is not merely a physical process, it is a spiritual one. You are using physical fire to neutralize the spiritual coldness of the food, making it a source of pure, gentle nourishment for both body and soul. For those who feel this spiritual chill in their own lives, or see it in their loved ones, Hildegard recommended a specific devotional practice. She advised a simple novena, 9 days of prayer, to the Holy Spirit, asking him to rekindle the sacred fire within. During these 9 days, one should consciously abstain from all cold dairy and instead consume warming foods like spelt porridge, fennel tea, and cooked fruits. While praying, "Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful and kindle in them the fire of your love." This is the beauty of her integrated vision. a practical dietary change paired with a powerful spiritual act. If your heart has been moved by this revelation, especially for the sake of your children and family, comment, "Lord, bring warmth to my home." This is a prayer for yourself and a blessing for all those under your care. But the poisons were not only those that affected the emotions. The next vision would strike at the very core of doctrine, revealing a substance that clouded the intellect and made the soul deaf to the truths of the faith. Palavras, 938, part 8 to 10. As we move to the sixth revelation, the focus shifts from the emotional and physical to the purely doctrinal. This poison is particularly insidious because it attacks the intellect, the very faculty through which we come to know and love God's truth. It creates a spiritual fog that makes the clarity of church teaching seem confusing, harsh, or irrelevant. This warning comes from a section in her masterwork, Civius, Know the Ways of the Lord, where the visions are not of fields or kitchens, but of cosmic and theological realities. She was shown a vision of a great, clear, fast-flowing river, which represented the living tradition of the church, the pure doctrine flowing from Christ and the apostles. In this river swam beautiful silver fish, their scales gleaming in the divine light. These fish, she understood, represented souls nourished by pure doctrine, clear, agile, and full of life. But then her gaze was directed to the murky, stagnant pools at the river's edge. In these dark, muddy bottoms crawled creatures she described as serpentine fish and bottom dwellers, eels, catfish, and other creatures that thrive in the muck. They represented souls who choose to feed on spiritual filth, heresy, doubt, and worldly philosophies. The sixth hidden poison is the consumption of these unclean, bottom-feeding fish. Again, Hildegard's concern was not ecological, but theological. For her, the habitat and nature of an animal revealed its spiritual signature. The clean silver fish from the fast-flowing river lived in and consumed purity. Their very being was aligned with clarity and movement. When you eat such a fish, like trout or salmon from clean waters, you absorb that spiritual quality of clarity. It sharpens the mind and makes the intellect more receptive to divine truth. The bottom dwellers, however, live in and consume decay. They thrive in darkness and stagnation. Their spiritual signature is one of confusion, spiritual laziness, and a preference for darkness over light. When you consume them, you are ingesting the energy of spiritual stagnation. She warned that a diet including these creatures makes the soul muddy and the intellect sluggish. It becomes difficult to grasp the finer points of theology. The catechism seems boring, papal encyclicals seem irrelevant, and the writings of the Church Fathers seem incomprehensible. It creates a preference for shallow, emotionally driven spirituality over the robust, intellectual tradition of the Church. You may find yourself more drawn to comforting but theologically empty platitudes than to the challenging, life-changing truths of the gospel. This is the great danger. You lose your taste for truth. The correction is a conscious and deliberate choice to consume only clean fish from pure sources. This is a powerful, sacramental act. Every time you choose the clear water fish over the bottom dweller, you are making a statement of intent for your soul. I choose clarity over confusion. I choose truth over error. I choose the living river of tradition over the stagnant pools of the world. This is not just about fish. It is a physical enactment of a spiritual commitment. This principle connects directly to the Church's ancient practice of Friday abstinence. The call to eat fish on Fridays is not merely a penance. It is an invitation to partake in the spiritual quality of clarity, to sharpen the mind for the coming Sabbath. By choosing the right kind of fish, you amplify the spiritual benefit of this beautiful discipline. If you desire this spiritual clarity, if you long to have a mind that is sharp, discerning, and joyfully receptive to the deep truths of our faith, comment now, Lord, grant me clarity of mind. Let this prayer be the beginning of a new commitment to nourishing your intellect as well as your body and heart. Hildegard's vision of the river and the fish was a stark reminder that every choice, no matter how small, has a theological dimension. The world wants to keep your mind foggy, your spirit stagnant, and your soul feeding on the muck of doubt. But God calls you to the clear, fast-flowing river of truth. The choice is yours, and it is made in part at your dinner table. But as the vision of the murky water receded, it was replaced by a rapid succession of images. 3 poisons revealed one after the other, each more common and more dangerous than the last, culminating in a root vegetable that perfectly mimicked holiness, but was in reality a vessel of spiritual poison. Palavras 9:45, Party 9:10. The divine light now intensified, and Hildegard was shown not 1, but 3 poisons in rapid succession, as if to impress upon her the urgency and the interconnectedness of these daily dangers. These are the intermediate revelations, the bridge to the final, most devastating truths. The 5th poison was a direct assault on the modern obsession with raw and natural. She was shown a person eating a large bowl of raw vegetables, especially root vegetables and tough greens, late in the evening. They believed they were being supremely healthy, but Hildegard saw this act as a profound violence against the body. She taught that the human digestive system, our inner fire, is strongest at midday, in concert with the sun. In the evening, this fire naturally wanes. Eating a large quantity of cold, raw food at night is like throwing a pile of damp, heavy logs onto a dwindling campfire. It smothers the flame. Physically, this leads to bloating, gas, and poor sleep as the body struggles all night to cook the food it was given. Spiritually, it's even worse. The soul is tethered to the body's exhausting work all night, unable to ascend in dreams or rest in God's peace. It creates a spiritual state of perpetual exhaustion and undigested anxieties. The correction is simple. Eat your main meal at midday and consume only light, cooked foods in the evening, like a warm vegetable soup or some cooked fruit. This aligns your body with the sacred rhythms of creation. The 4th poison was a substance of corruption, a symbol of something good that has been allowed to spoil. She saw a bottle of fine wine, representing joy, celebration, and the blood of Christ. But it was left open, uncared for, and had turned to vinegar. People were consuming this vinegar in dressings and tonics, thinking it was a health elixir. Hildegard saw this as ingesting the very essence of bitterness and decay. To consume vinegar, she warned, is to invite a sour and judgmental spirit into your soul. It makes one critical, cynical, and quick to find fault in others. It is the perfect condiment for a soul that has lost its joy. The correction is to guard the sources of joy in your life as you would a fine wine. Do not let your spiritual gifts spoil through neglect, and in your diet, replace this symbol of decay with its life-giving counterparts, a splash of fresh lemon juice, or a small glass of good wine, consumed with gratitude. But then came the 3rd revelation, the most dangerous of this trio, a true deceiver in the vegetable kingdom. This is one of the 3 great hidden poisons from our title. Hildegard saw a field of onions, which she praised as a powerful food for cleansing the blood and warming the body. But growing right beside them was another plant, so similar in appearance that many could not tell the difference. This plant was the leek. The 3rd poison is the leek. She called it a useless herb that was a deceiver of the gut and the soul. Outwardly, it resembles the noble onion, but inwardly, she saw that its spiritual properties were the opposite. While the onion is sharp, cleansing, and fiery, the leek is slimy, chaotic, and engenders black bile. In her system of medicine, black bile was the humor associated with melancholy, depression, and dark, obsessive thoughts. To eat the leek is to consume a physical substance that directly produces the spiritual poison of despair. It is a counterfeit onion. It mimics the form of something good, but delivers the opposite result. This is the very definition of demonic deception. How many of us have cooked with leeks, making soups and stews, thinking we were adding a gentle, savory flavor, all the while creating a dish that fosters melancholy in our families? If you have been shaken by these rapid-fire revelations, and you vow to remove these deceptions from your home, comment, "I reject all counterfeits, Lord." This is a prayer of spiritual warfare, a cleansing of your kitchen and your heart. We have now unveiled the poison of spiritual emptiness, white flour, the poison of spiritual chaos, pork, the poison of melancholy, strawberries, the poison of fear, cold dairy, the poison of confusion, unclean fish, the poison of exhaustion, raw evening meals, the poison of bitterness, vinegar, and the poison of deception, leeks. But the final 2 poisons are worse. The next is not a root, but a fruit so beloved, so tempting in its sweetness, that it has become a symbol of earthly pleasure, all the while acting as a direct channel for the spirit of sadness. Palabras 9:47, Parte 10:10. We have arrived at the final two revelations, the climax of Hildegard's vision and the core of her warning for our modern age. These are the poisons that are most deeply embedded in our culture, celebrated as wholesome, yet carrying the most potent spiritual venom. The second most dangerous poison she was shown is a fruit associated with sweetness, with late summer, with a soft and gentle pleasure. But in her vision, she saw people biting into this fruit, and with each bite, a subtle gray veil would descend over their hearts, making them vulnerable to despair and a deep, inconsolable sadness. This fruit, she wrote in Causai et Curae, is heavy for the stomach to digest and provokes a melancholy humor in a person. The second hidden poison is the peach. Its nature, she explained, is excessively cold and watery, lacking the spiritual fire of other fruits like apples or cherries. When consumed, it introduces this cold, heavy water into your system, which directly weighs down the spirit. It is, she declared, the quintessential food for those who already struggle with sadness, as it amplifies and solidifies that state. The enemy, in his cunning, has made this fruit of melancholy a symbol of delight, ensuring that those who are most vulnerable to sadness will be the very ones to reach for it, unknowingly deepening their own spiritual prison. But it is the final revelation, the number one hidden poison, that is the most shocking and prophetic. Hildegard did not see a plant or an animal. She saw a metal box of demonic impatience. She saw people placing God's perfect, life-filled food into this box, which then, with an invisible, agitated fire, violently shook the very essence of the food, leaving it hot on the outside, but spiritually dead on the inside. She saw that this process stripped the food of all its viriditas, its sacred life force, more completely than any other method of cooking. The number one hidden poison in your kitchen is not a food at all. It is the microwave oven. This was her prophecy of an invention that would arrive 800 years in the future. She described it as the ultimate act of disrespect to God's creation. It is cooking without presence, without love, without patience, without real fire. It is the physical manifestation of our age's demand for instant gratification. When you nuke your food, you are not just reheating it, you are bombarding it with a chaotic, unnatural energy that obliterates its spiritual signature. You are consuming a corpse, a nutritionally and spiritually empty vessel that fills your body with the vibration of impatience and chaos. This is why you can eat a microwaved meal and feel strangely agitated and unsatisfied afterward. Your body got calories, but your soul got nothing but static. The moral and spiritual consequences are immense. By relying on these poisons, we have created a population that is spiritually sick, tired, and heavy. We have made ourselves docile and easy targets for temptation, too foggy to pray with fervor, too melancholic to feel true joy, and too impatient to await God's timing. The protocols are clear and they begin today. First, you must remove the microwave from your home. It is an altar to impatience, and it has no place in a Christian kitchen. Reheat your food with the gentle, real fire of the stove or the oven. Second, lovingly discard the leeks, the peaches, the pork, the white flour. See this not as waste, but as a spiritual exorcism of your pantry. Third, bless your food not only before you eat it, but before you cook it. Ask God to fill it with His viriditas, and to make it a source of health for body and soul. Now, let us seal this new beginning with a prayer of healing and consecration. Join me in this prayer. From your heart, Lord Jesus, healer of souls and bodies, I ask your forgiveness for my ignorance. Cleanse my body of these hidden poisons and purify my kitchen, making it a sanctuary of health and holiness. Rekindle the sacred fire within me, restoring the divine harmony you intended for my soul. May the food I prepare become a sacrament of love for my family, nourishing them not just for this life, but for eternity. Grant us the wisdom to choose life, the discernment to reject all counterfeits, and the strength to become true stewards of your glorious creation. We claim our divine inheritance of vitality, clarity, and peace through your most holy name. If you have made this prayer with me, and you accept this mission to restore God's divine order to your life, type Amen in the comments right now with conviction. Subscribe and turn on the notifications because our journey together is just beginning. In our next meeting, we will not speak of poisons, but of antidotes. We will unlock Hildegard's secret of the 7 sacred spices that heal the body and protect the soul, the very seals of the soul's pantry that she was shown.